in my mind, and this is just from the filmmaker's point of view, of course it's up to each member of the audience to make of it what they will, but that they both are very human. I mean, they recognise the humanity in each other. I know that's a bit of a cliche, but it's interesting to me that if you had to ask one of the things, and Idris may have a different answer, what is one of the things that drives the djinn? I think he really wants to know what it feels like to be human. And in many ways, I think that's the same thing with Alethea. She basically experiences the world through other people's stories, and but eventually becomes deeply immersed in her own story. So that's my sort of answer for that.
I think that the djinn sort of really recognizes an equilibrium, right? This is a man that sort of understands story, narrative, understands how engaging and how to use the language to bring someone in, and then find someone that isn't easy to manipulate. And, you know, that intrigue draws him even closer, because it's beyond, you know, now, okay, I can manipulate you with my words, perhaps with my gifts, to make you release me, but there's something more that I think he senses in Alethea, and then finds this sort of comfort, you know, in the sense that, well, I've met my match, you know, and I think within that, there's a real exploration of something he hasn't felt before, which we could call love, we could call some sort of desire, but it turns into something very powerful between the two of them, and something, again, like he hasn't felt before. So I think that's part of what draws the djinn in, and what he sees, which is so unique about Alethea. And for him, I guess the doorway into, you know, the human experience, it's being tantalized in the opened and shut by Alethea to come on in, well, let's see what you've got. It's really interesting when, you know, Tilda and I discovering this, and with George, and we sat around a table for a long time telling each other stories, and that was part of the journey of finding these characters. Anyway, that's a different answer altogether, but yeah.
Well, she's an extraordinary person in that, you know, when confronted by a djinn who's proposing to her to grant 3 wishes, she says she doesn't have any. I mean, that's a poser, not just for the djinn, who's never met anyone like that before, but I think for us, I mean, it's quite a thing to think about, someone who really doesn't want anything. And I think when Idris so rightly talks about equilibrium, what that speaks to is that they are both in a way, they're both, it's not that they're solitary, but they're both unsocialized in a way. They're both in their own, just as he's been in a bottle for 3,000 years, she's been in a sort of bottle as well, of her own making. And they come together, in my view, in a very healthy relationship, where people kind of show each other their solitudes. They show each other even their loneliness, and they go, okay, well, there's only so much I can do about that. I can't really mess with it. That's yours, and I'll show you mine, and let's just sort of keep each other company in this acknowledgement that that is sort of what a human is because we're all on our own path, and we keep each other company, and if we're lucky, we find wonderful people to keep each other company, and that's what they discover. And I would call it love, but it's actually, as you correctly say, it's so beyond any kind of, the romantic idea of love that we've been sold for so long is that people become one. And these two never become one. They come together, they witness each other, and they support each other, and well, I'm not going to spoil, but, you know, they stay apart, as it were. Yeah, I'm not going to say what happens, but they don't merge, they don't lose themselves in each other, and that's really sophisticated and incredibly mature, because the other thing about them is that they weren't born yesterday. I mean, she hasn't lived 3,000 years, but almost. But they've lived long lives, and they have things they've survived, both of them. They're not fresh young beings who are ready to merge with another. And anyway, so I think it's actually very relatable. I think it's not, you don't have to be a djinn to feel this way about you know, making some kind of alliance with someone.
Well, one of the opportunities that I was drawn to when we were making this film, on the one hand, it's two people in a room, a relatively small room, and yet we fly off into both of their imaginations and the collective imaginations of us as humankind, you know, looking at the various cultures. And that was very intriguing, bouncing between the two. And of course, you know, as Alethea announces at the beginning of the story, it's a fairy tale, and so it's an exercise in imagination. And I don't know, you know, I'm always reluctant to impose my personal meanings on the stories, but it's certainly a story, or one of the notions of the story is to ask the question, what is real and what is not? And that becomes you know, we play, when we go to the cinema, particularly the cinema, and we kind of surrender ourselves into whatever world is created on the screen. And as we know, even if it's a documentary, it's not the real world. So that's exactly what's going on, particularly in Alethea's experience, is what the audiences go through, and I think it's why we're attracted to stories.